The hum of the shipping yard was relentless, a constant rhythm of cranes, engines, and shouted orders that had once been Harris's world. But today, it felt like a distant echo, a life that belonged to someone else. At 54R, Harris stood alone beneath the towering stacks of containers, the weight of years etched into the lines on his face. Once a respected manager at Neptune Shipping, he was now a ghost in his own story, scapegoated and shattered by a single project gone wrong. The headlines had been brutal: costly failure, corporate disaster, man behind the collapse. His name was smeared across every report, his reputation burned to ashes. But Harris knew the truth was darker than the lies told. Betrayed, discarded, and haunted by shadows he could no longer ignore, he clenched his fists. This was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of a war, one that would take him deep into the heart of corruption, where trust was a weapon and betrayal a constant companion. He whispered to the night, a promise to himself: I will uncover the truth. I will clear my name, and I will make them pay. The shipping yard's cold wind howled around him like a warning. But Harris was ready to fight back. Harris stood motionless by the towering glass windows of the shipping company's headquarters, watching the gray sky press down over the docks. The smell of salt and diesel mixed with the cold bite of early morning fog. But inside, the sterile air of the office was suffocating. The walls, once filled with the buzz of efficiency and purpose, now felt like a cage closing in around him. At 54, he had spent nearly 3 decades climbing the ranks, starting as a dock worker and eventually becoming a respected project manager. Yet today, that lifetime of dedication had evaporated like mist. The news had spread fast. The project he had overseen, the Neptune's passage container route, had been a disaster. Millions of dollars lost, contracts canceled, and the company's reputation battered. The board had made him the scapegoat, and the headlines had been brutal. Incompetence cost company millions, screamed the front page of the industry journal. Harris had been publicly humiliated, stripped of his managerial duties, and left with nothing but whispers and pointed fingers. His phone buzzed relentlessly on the desk, but Harris ignored it. Calls from former colleagues, his wife, even his estranged son, everyone had their own version of what happened, none of them kind. The silence of the empty office was broken only by the faint tapping of his fingers against the cold wood. Memories flooded back, the long nights overseeing logistics, the trust he earned from his team, the laughter in the break room, the camaraderie that had once felt like family. Now all of it is gone. He glanced at the framed photo on his desk, him shaking hands with the company CEO at his promotion ceremony, radiant with pride and hope. That image felt like a lifetime ago. Behind his calm exterior, a storm raged. Betrayal wasn't just a word to Harris. It was a blade twisting deep in his chest. He hadn't failed, at least, not entirely. Something was off about the project, something no one else wanted to admit. But who would listen to him now? The company had already judged him guilty. His name was mud. As the office lights dimmed and the janitor began to tidy the floor, Harris gathered his things. The sting of rejection followed him out into the cold air. Outside, the docks were alive with cranes lifting containers, workers shouting across the yard, and the distant horn of a ship preparing to set sail. The sea, relentless and vast, seemed indifferent to his ruin. Walking away from the building for the last time, Harris made a silent vow. He would not go quietly. He would find the truth behind the disaster, clear his name, and take down those who had set him up. His career, his honor, and his life depended on it. This was only the beginning. The nights were the hardest. When the office lights faded and the city's noise dimmed to a distant hum, Harris found himself trapped in a restless prison of memories and doubts. His small apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt cold and unfamiliar. The worn leather chair in the corner, his battered desk, the family photo staring blankly from the walls, all reminders of a life unraveling. At 54, Harris knew the value of patience and perseverance, but patience had limits, and the weight of disgrace crushed him like a tidal wave. The whispers at the shipping company, the cold shoulders from longtime colleagues, even the terse words from his wife, Layla, everything chipped away at his confidence. "Maybe you should just let it go," she had said, voice tight with exhaustion. But Harris couldn't. Not yet. He had spent his entire adult life working for Neptune Shipping, sacrificing holidays, missing birthdays, and pushing through exhaustion. He was no stranger to hard work. Yet in one catastrophic project, his entire legacy had been shattered. And now, haunted by the question, what really went wrong, he knew he had to act. Sitting at his cluttered kitchen table, Harris spread out the few files he had managed to keep: budget sheets, internal memos, project timelines. He traced the lines with a finger, seeking a pattern. Something didn't add up. There were gaps, delays that were never explained, shipments that were marked delivered but with no corresponding paperwork, unusual directives from higher-ups that didn't fit the project plan. His mind raced with possibilities, but trust was a luxury he no longer possessed. Every phone call was a potential trap. Every email might be monitored. Someone wanted him silenced, and he had no allies left in sight. The edge of desperation pushed him to take a risk. He created a burner phone separate from his personal life and set up encrypted email accounts under aliases. If he was going to fight back, it would be in the shadows like a ghost. The plan was simple yet perilous: infiltrate the remnants of the project, sabotage it from within, and uncover the truth. But executing it meant returning to a world that had rejected him, pretending to be someone he was not, all while dodging suspicion. One rainy evening, Harris found himself back at the docks, far from the polished corporate offices. The smell of salt and rust was familiar but bittersweet. He watched workers unloading containers, noting the security measures and patterns. His years of experience told him exactly where to look and who to avoid. That night, alone in his apartment, Harris mapped out the first steps. He would need allies, people on the inside who still cared about justice, who could help him expose the rot beneath the surface. But trust, again, was the greatest gamble. Sleep eluded him. The edges of his sanity frayed as visions of his downfall and the path to redemption blurred together. In this dark place between despair and determination, Harris steeled himself. Failure was no longer an option. His name, his family, and his very soul depended on what came next. The next morning, the man who had been broken and discarded would begin to fight back, not with anger, but with cold, calculated resolve. The first light of dawn seeped through the dusty blinds, casting long shadows across Harris's cramped apartment. The quiet was a stark contrast to the storm swirling inside his mind. Today was the day he would step into the shadows he had long avoided, the day his fight truly began. Harris dressed carefully in muted tones, his appearance now deliberately nondescript. Gone was the confident manager's tailored suit. In its place, a plain jacket and worn jeans. He glanced in the mirror, studying the man staring back. Older, warier, but with eyes burning quietly with resolve. The plan had been laid out with precision, each step calculated to avoid detection. His first move was to infiltrate the ongoing remnants of the Neptune's Passage project. Though officially shelved, parts of the operation still buzzed with activity, carrying shipments and harboring secrets. Using his old contacts sparingly, Harris reached out to a former team member, Amir, a young and sharp logistics coordinator who had quietly sympathized with him during the fallout. Amir was wary but agreed to meet in a discreet cafe nestled in a quiet corner of the city's industrial district. The kind of place overlooked by most, but perfect for whispered conversation. As Harris entered, the aroma of strong coffee and the low murmur of regulars greeted him. Amir sat in the back, eyes flicking up with cautious recognition. "Harris," Amir said, voice low. "Didn't think I'd see you here." "Not here for a reunion," Harris replied, sliding into the seat. "I need your help. The project, it wasn't just a failure. There's something rotten beneath the surface." Amir's eyes narrowed. "You mean the rumors? Illegal shipments? Smuggling?" Harris nodded slowly. "Exactly. I've started digging. There are hidden containers, shipments not logged in official records. Someone's using the project to cover their tracks. I want to bring it down from the inside." The weight of those words hung between them. Amir glanced around, lowering his voice. "You know that's dangerous. If you're wrong, you'll be finished for good. And if you're right, you're up against powerful people." "I've lived through the worst," Harris said quietly. "I'm not afraid anymore." Together, they mapped out their first move, gaining access to the shipping yard after hours, locating the suspicious containers and gathering evidence without alerting the security teams. Amir promised to provide internal access codes and tips on patrol schedules. while Haris would work on surveillance and documentation. Back at his apartment, Harry set up a small command center, a cluttered desk with multiple screens, a scanner, and a secure laptop. The faint hum of technology was the only comfort in the silence. Every file he saved, every encrypted message he sent, was a step closer to unveiling the truth. Yet, beneath the methodical planning, a quiet dread lingered. Harris knew the path he chose could unravel everything he once believed in, but the alternative, living as a broken man condemned by lies, was no longer acceptable. As night fell, Harris prepared for his first mission into the heart of the Neptune's Passage project. The docks awaited a maze of steel and shadows, where secrets hid beneath layers of cargo and deception. He slipped into the darkness, a man reborn in resolve, ready to face whatever dangers lurked in the cold night air. The night air was heavy with the salty scent of the sea and the faint, mechanical clatter of cranes shifting containers in the distance. Harris crouched behind a stack of steel shipping crates, his breath steady but heart pounding with the familiar rush of danger. The docks, his old domain, had transformed into a labyrinth of cold steel and hidden threats under the cloak of darkness. The Neptune's Passage project was supposed to be the company's shining achievement, a cutting-edge trade route meant to secure the firm's dominance in international shipping. But tonight, it was something else entirely, a web of secrets and lies that Haris was determined to unravel. Guided by Amir's whispered directions through his earpiece, Haris moved silently across the yard. Security guards patrolled predictable routes, their flashlights slicing through the fog like slow-moving searchlights. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified in the stillness. He reached the designated section, a row of containers marked with obscure codes and unofficial seals. His fingers traced the cold metal surface, searching for signs of tampering or hidden compartments. The dull thud of footsteps made him freeze. A guard was nearby, scanning the area with suspicion. Harris pressed himself against the crates, heart hammering, waiting until the light passed before inching forward. Pulling out a small toolkit, he began to carefully pry open the lock on one container. Inside, he found crates wrapped tightly in black plastic too heavy and tightly sealed to be normal cargo. Among them, a few containers had suspiciously altered manifests, confirming his growing fears. The evidence was mounting. This project was a front for smuggling illicit goods hidden among legitimate shipments. But why had no one noticed? Or worse, who was orchestrating it? Suddenly, a crackle in his earpiece startled him. Haris, move. Guard heading your way. He slipped back into the shadows just as the guard passed, barely containing his panic. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. It was a game of cat and mouse, and the stakes were life and death. Back in his apartment, hours later, Haris laid out photographs of the containers and scanned documents on his desk. The pattern was clearer. Shipments scheduled through ports notorious for lax inspections, unexpected reroutes, and payments funneling through offshore accounts. This was bigger than he had imagined, a vast criminal enterprise operating under the company's nose. But the deeper he dug, the more isolated he felt. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. Stop digging, Harris, or you'll regret it. The threat only hardened his resolve. He thought of his family, Layla, who still wavered between support and fear, and his son, distant and silent since the scandal. This fight was no longer just about clearing his name. It was about reclaiming his life, restoring the trust and love that had frayed under the weight of lies. With the first pieces of the puzzle in hand and danger closing in, Haris knew there was no turning back. The shadows he once fled into now held the keys to his redemption. The days blurred together in a haze of paranoia and meticulous planning. Haris knew every moment he lingered near the truth. The noose around his neck tightened. The shipping company was a fortress of secrets, and the people who controlled it wielded power with ruthless precision. Each morning Haris donned the mask of a broken man, a man who had lost everything and was no longer a threat. But beneath that facade, his mind was sharp and restless, piecing together fragments of information, scanning for inconsistencies, and watching for betrayals. Amir became his lifeline in the shadows, their whispered meetings held in cramped corners of rundown cafes or behind stacks of crates in the docks. But even Amir was beginning to show signs of strain. He was young, inexperienced in the dangerous politics swirling around Neptune shipping, and Harris feared his friend might break under pressure. Harris clenched his fists. The walls were closing in faster than he had anticipated, but retreat was not an option. Instead, he doubled down, using his growing knowledge of the company's inner workings to outmaneuver his adversaries. He hacked into the encrypted files of the project, uncovering emails and messages that painted a chilling picture. Senior executives receiving kickbacks, complicity in the smuggling operation, and calculated moves to blame the project's failure on him. His name was a scapegoat, a convenient sacrifice to protect the true perpetrators. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound. Harris had trusted these men. He had believed in the company that was his life. Now they had discarded him like refuse. But the most painful discovery was yet to come. In one hidden folder, a file named simply confidential. Harris caught his eye. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside were photographs, some from years ago, showing Harris signing off on documents he had no memory of, approving shipments, seemingly complicit in the very scheme he sought to destroy. He staggered back from the screen, heart pounding. Has he been used all along? Was his downfall not just orchestrated but manufactured with his unwitting help? Doubt gnawed at his mind like a relentless parasite. Was he truly a victim, or had he been a pawn? The line between ally and enemy blurred dangerously. The threat messages escalated calls, with heavy breathing, shadowy figures tailing his movements, Layla growing distant and fearful. One evening, as rain hammered against the windows, Harris sat alone in the darkness, grappling with the cruel irony of his fate. To redeem himself, he would have to confront not only the corrupt empire that betrayed him, but the hidden parts of his past that might never forgive him. The web tightened. The game was no longer just about exposing the truth. It was about survival and reclaiming his soul from the abyss. The city's lights flickered through Harris's rain-streaked window like distant stars in a stormy sky, cold and unreachable. He sat motionless at his cluttered desk, staring at the photographs and files that haunted him. His own hands trembled slightly, a subtle betrayal of the storm raging within. He had always believed he knew who he was. A man of principle, a devoted husband, a steadfast professional. But now, shadows clung to his reflection, warping the identity he thought untouchable. The faces in those files, his own signature, his own approval whispered accusations he was desperate to silence. Desperation drove him back to Amir, hoping that the young man's fresh eyes might help unravel the tangled threads of truth and lies. They met in a forgotten corner of the city, a derelict warehouse converted into a makeshift hideout. The stale air carried the scent of rust and old machinery, a fitting backdrop for the secrets they unearthed. "Look," Harris said, pushing a stack of documents toward Amir. "These aren't fabrications. Someone forged my consent, but it's all too perfect, almost like they wanted me to see it." Amir's brow furrowed. "That means this goes deeper. Someone's manipulating you, playing you like a puppet. We need to find the source." Hours passed as they combed through encrypted emails and surveillance footage, but each lead spiraled into a dead end or a deeper mystery. Meanwhile, Harris felt eyes on him, unseen watchers lurking in the shadows of his life. Layla's silence grew colder. Their phone calls became shorter. He feared his fight was fracturing the last fragile bonds he had left. One night, returning home, he found a single envelope slipped beneath his door. No signature, no explanation. Inside, a photograph. Layla, meeting secretly with a man Harris didn't recognize, her face tense, guarded. His world cracked further. Was she protecting him or hiding something darker? Haunted by doubts and betrayals, Harris sought solace in the one place he never imagined returning, the old shipping yard. Now a ghostly monument to his ruined past. Standing beneath the towering cranes, he breathed in the salty air, the scent of the sea mingling with the bitter taste of regret. In the deepening twilight, he vowed that no matter how many faces in the dark tried to deceive or destroy him, he would uncover the truth, even if it meant tearing down the very foundations of everything he once believed. But as he turned to leave, a shadow detached itself from the mist, silent, watching, waiting. Harris wasn't alone. The morning sun filtered through the dusty blinds of Harris's small apartment, casting long slats of light across the scattered papers and open laptop screens. Sleep had been elusive these past nights, each hour punctuated by a relentless storm of thoughts. Suspicion, fear, determination. The knock at the door was sharp, sudden, and Harris's heart skipped a beat. Every sound now triggered an alert deep in his mind, a warning that danger could be just beyond the threshold. He moved cautiously, peering through the peephole before opening the door a crack. Standing there was a woman he had never expected to see again, Miriam El Sayed. Once a rising star in the company's legal department, Miriam had left abruptly 2 years prior, under circumstances shrouded in whispers. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, met his with a mixture of resolve and unspoken history. "Harris," she said quietly, "I've been watching. I know what they did to you, and I know you're onto something bigger." He hesitated, memories of past encounters swirling, professional clashes, tense negotiations, and a mutual distrust that had defined their relationship. Yet now, she stood here, offering her help. "Why should I trust you?" Harris asked, voice rough from disuse. Miriam's gaze didn't waver. "Because I have my own reasons. The corruption runs deeper than you realize, and I've been fighting it from within. But alone, I'm just a whisper in a storm." Reluctantly, Harris stepped aside to let her in. As they settled at the cluttered kitchen table, Miriam laid out what she knew: names of executives involved, financial trails hidden in offshore accounts, and hints of a shadowy syndicate orchestrating the smuggling operation. She also revealed how her forced departure was tied to her attempts to expose the scandal, a battle she had lost for now. The alliance was uneasy but necessary. Together, they crafted a new plan, one that required careful infiltration of the company's secure network and discreet interviews with key insiders. Harris's insider knowledge, combined with Miriam's legal expertise and contacts, created a formidable force. Yet, every step forward exposes them to greater risks. That afternoon, as they prepared to access a confidential archive, Harris noticed a flicker on the security monitors. A figure moving stealthily near the building's entrance. Someone was watching. His instincts screamed caution. Trust was a scarce commodity, and betrayal lurked closer than ever. But with Miriam by his side, Harris felt the first glimmer of hope in months. Together, they were no longer just victims of a conspiracy, they were players poised to reclaim their lives. The sterile chill of the Neptune Shipping Headquarters underground archive felt suffocating. Harris and Miriam exchanged glances before slipping inside a world away from the bustling docks and offices, hidden beneath layers of steel and concrete. Every step echoed in the cavernous room, where rows of filing cabinets and server racks held the company's darkest secrets. Miriam's fingers danced over the keypad, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. The door clicked open, revealing a vault of incriminating data. Harris's pulse quickened as he sifted through physical files, shipping manifests, contract amendments, and financial records, each document a thread in the tapestry of deception. Amid the mountain of papers, Miriam's voice cut through the silence. "Look here. These containers listed as electronics were rerouted multiple times, disappearing off official logs. But the internal notes tell a different story." On her tablet, encrypted emails flashed a conversation between high-ranking executives discussing special shipments and discreet deliveries. The code language was unmistakable to those who knew. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Every discovery fueled Harris's determination but deepened the shadow of danger. They knew the moment the company's security team detected the breach, escape would be impossible. Suddenly, the faint hum of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Harris's breath caught. Miriam's eyes met his, sharp and alert. "We're not alone," she whispered. In that heartbeat, Harris realized the fragile line they walked between uncovering the truth and falling into the trap set for them. With swift precision, they packed the most critical evidence into a secure drive, but as they slipped toward the exit, an alarm blared harsh, unrelenting. "Move," Miriam urged. Heart pounding, Harris dashed through corridors, shadows chasing his every step. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder. Heavy boots, rapid breaths, and cold voices ordering capture. They burst through a service door, emerging into the blinding daylight. The streets were crowded, faces anonymous, but the weight of unseen eyes pressed down. Safe for now. Yet Harris knew this was only the beginning. The secrets they carried could shatter the company or seal their fates forever. Back at his apartment, the evidence illuminated the dim room, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. But as Harris prepared to send the files to trusted allies, his phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. Stop digging, or everything you love will be buried with your lies. The war had escalated. And Harris was running out of time. The message lingered on Harris's screen like a poison, its threat weaving a cold shadow over his fragile hope. He stared at it, heart pounding, fingers trembling. Who knew so much? Who was watching so closely? For the first time since the fall, Harris felt the crushing weight of paranoia settling in. The lines between friend and foe blurred into a haze of suspicion and fear. His mind raced back to the people closest to him. Colleagues, friends, even Layla. Could any of them have betrayed him? The thought twisted like a knife. Then, a chilling realization struck. The leak wasn't outside. It was inside. That night, under the dim light of his kitchen, Harris sifted through every conversation, every meeting, every exchanged glance, replaying them until his sanity frayed. Miriam's steadfast presence was a balm, but even she couldn't quell the storm within. "We have to be careful," she warned, eyes sharp as a hawk's. "They have ears everywhere." They devised a plan to flush out the traitor, a risky game of misinformation and surveillance. Harris would feed false leads, watching who took the bait. Days crawled by in a nerve-wracking silence, until one evening, the trap snapped shut. A familiar voice echoed outside his door, soft, hesitant, yet unmistakable. Harris opened it to find Sammy, his longtime colleague and trusted friend, standing there with eyes clouded in guilt. "I didn't want it to come to this," Sammy whispered. "But they threatened my family. They forced me." Betrayal twisted through Harris's chest like icy fire. The man he had confided in, laughed with, relied on, now the conduit for his enemies. "Why didn't you come to me?" Harris asked, voice breaking. "I was scared," Sammy admitted, tears slipping down his cheeks. "They promised to protect my wife and daughter. I had no choice." Pain, anger, and sorrow collided inside Harris, threatening to consume him. But beneath the hurt, a steely resolve emerged. "If we survive this," Harris said quietly, "we will fight together. No more secrets, no more lies." Sammy nodded, a fragile alliance forged in the crucible of shared danger. The enemy within had been revealed, but the battle was far from over. And Harris knew the greatest fight lay ahead. Reclaiming not just his name, but his very soul. The night was heavy with rain, the city's neon lights blurring into streaks on wet pavement. Harris stood alone on the rooftop of the shipping company's headquarters, the wind tugging at his coat as memories flooded his mind. Every step that had led him here, the betrayals, the revelations, the fragile alliances culminated in this moment of truth. Beside him, Sammy and Miriam exchanged determined glances. The evidence they'd painstakingly gathered was ready to be unleashed, a dossier, exposing the corrupt syndicate that had not only orchestrated the smuggling but also destroyed Harris's life. But the final piece of the puzzle haunted him still. The undeniable fact that, unknowingly, he had been complicit. His own decisions, buried under layers of manipulation, had helped the very scheme he now fought to destroy. The weight of that truth pressed down like a stone, but Harris refused to be crushed by it. "We take this to the board," he said, voice steady despite the storm inside. "Public exposure. No more hiding in the shadows." Miriam nodded, already preparing the encrypted files for release to the authorities and media. As dawn crept over the horizon, the company's internal network was flooded with the damning evidence. Screens lit up with messages, emails, and live feeds revealing the extent of the corruption. Executives scrambled, security scrambled, and the world outside watched as the giant began to crumble. But just when Harris thought the battle was won, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man he had trusted most, his longtime mentor and the company's CEO, Victor Albright. Victor's calm smile was chilling. "You've done well to get this far, Harris," he said, voice smooth as silk. "But redemption isn't given freely." A tense silence fell. "You were a pawn, yes, but also a player. I needed you to take the fall while the real operation stayed hidden. And you did perfectly." Harris's breath hitched. "You betrayed me." Victor shrugged. In business, loyalty is a luxury few can afford. Before Harris could react, security moved in. But Miriam and Sammy were ready. A sudden burst of alerts overwhelmed the guards, allowing Harris to slip away into the chaos. Outside, rain washed over his face as he breathed in the taste of freedom and retribution. He knew the fight wasn't over, not yet. But now, armed with truth and unbroken resolve, Harris was ready to reclaim everything he'd lost, and this time, he would win not just for himself, but for justice. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more real-life stories of liberation and justice.